When you see the word minimalism, you probably imagine some pretentious 20-something sitting in the middle of an empty room with a cup of black coffee and a pocket operator. And while people like me may find that lifestyle and aesthetic weirdly appealing, a lot of you probably don't, and that's completely understandable. However, I do think that a minimalist approach to owning music gear can be helpful. For me personally, it's helped me make more music in less time and have more fun in the process. But before I get into that, I do want to have a quick disclaimer here. I definitely do consider myself at least somewhat of a minimalist, but I do have quite a bit of gear, definitely a lot more than the average person would. But in the overall landscape of gear nerds and music production nerds, I've tried to keep my setup quite a bit smaller, and every single piece in there is very, very intentionally chosen for a very specific reason. So the first benefit of having a more minimalist setup is that you learn your gear better. Time is limited, especially for those of us in school or working full-time jobs, and so the more gear that you have, the more synthesizers, groove boxes, sequencers, drum machines, so on and so forth that you have, the less time you have to devote to each individual piece of gear. The flip side of this, from my own experience, is that really diving deep into a few different music production setups and putting a lot of focus into those has made me really, really good at using those pieces of gear. A prime example being the Novation Circuit right here behind me. I've sunk so much time into this little box because for a long time it was one of the only pieces of gear that I had, and then the more that I learned it, the more that I grew to really love it. So at this point, not only am I crazy fast at using it and could probably do it with my eyes closed at this point, but I've been able to get a ton out of it. And not to toot my own horn, but probably more than a lot of people do, just because I've spent a lot of time with it. I figured out all its little intricacies and what it's really good at and how to get huge sounds out of this small device. And this goes for other gear too. With a synthesizer, taking the time to really learn every single in and out of the synthesizer engine, what every single knob does, how it affects stuff, means that you'll have a much deeper understanding of how that works and therefore be able to get a lot more out of it. And that's the big key here, and that's why I'm kind of belaboring this point. The better you understand something, the more you get out of it, and the more powerful it becomes when you kind of wield it. And having less gear allows you to do that. Personally, I would rather have a really deep understanding of a few powerful pieces of gear than a really shallow understanding of a ton of pieces of gear. And if the novelty of trying a bunch of new stuff appeals to you, then that's fine. But a lot of us got into this game specifically to make music. And while I can speak for all of us in saying that we love gear, music, at least for me and a lot of other people, is still top priority. Kind of going along with that is the fact that if you have less gear, you have less choice paralysis. And oddly enough, I've actually had a little bit of this as my setups expanded. Because as I've tried more and more to become one of the go-to mobile production people, I've gotten more groove boxes. I have a Novation Circuit, I have an Electribe, I have an OP1, I have a pocket operator, and especially because there's quite a bit of crossover between the OP1, the Novation Circuit, and the Electribe, I find myself a little more hesitant when picking out which groove box to throw on my backpack and take with me somewhere. They still all do serve distinct purposes, and I can still recognize that, but I think adding another groove box onto that mix would be a stupid idea. And if I were to do that because of duplicating functionality, the Electribe would probably be the first to go. This kind of choice paralysis could definitely also be a thing if you have a ton of synths. Once again, especially if some of them duplicate functionality. It's one thing if you have a wavetable synth, a subtractive synth, and an FM synth, but it's another thing if you have 3 subtractive synths, maybe 1 wavetable synth, and 2 FM synths. I'd imagine that there's at least some crossover in functionality, and it'll make it harder to just immediately pick one and start making music with it. And this leads me into the final thing, which is the whole limitation spark creativity thing, and that's definitely been the case for me. Going back to what I was saying earlier, having a more limited setup has made me more creative with it. I've made a ton of different genres with the gear that I have, and I've still not hit a limit yet. Don't upgrade your synths, your groove boxes, your sequencers, your drum machines, your effects, your DAW, your plugins, anything like that until you're pretty sure you've done as much as you possibly can with those, and upgrading will actually allow you to level up. So that is my case for why I think minimalism can help you with your music production. It'll help you learn your gear better. You'll have less choice paralysis. It'll keep it about the music, Limitations do spark creativity, and it'll get you in the mindset to make more music faster. I'm not saying you have to go and just sell all of your synths but one, unless you want to, but at least having a much more intentional approach to new gear purchases and which gear you have and use can be really helpful and lead to you making more music. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Over here next to my head is another video that you can watch with your face if you'd like, and if you'd like to subscribe, you can click or tap up over here somewhere. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video next week. Peace!